What's up, guys? It's your boy James, aka 68J, coming to you on this Tuesday, and I'm here with someone that I have a lot of respect for, someone who's well known in this community. My friend, the man, the myth, the legend, MetaLawMan. How are you doing, my friend?
Fantastic, Jay. Thank you so much for reaching out. I've been wanting to meet you, so this is our first time together. I'm really looking forward to having some fun.
Yes, sir. And I just definitely appreciate having you on the show and also getting to know you a little bit backstage. I like the challenge. I kind of like with your message. I said, if you got a pretty good 3-pointer, I might be in trouble. But other than that, we can. But no, it's definitely an honor having you on. Before we get started about your journey in crypto, some of the things that you're doing, let's talk about who is MetaLawMan, your journey prior to crypto, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Happy to do that. My dad was a lawyer. My sister is a lawyer. It just kind of was assumed. So I went through college at the University of Virginia, that I would go on to law school, which I did at Vanderbilt in Nashville, Tennessee. And after that, I went out to Los Angeles to start my career. I was a single man and went out to LA and was a lawyer, and it was cool. Got married pretty soon thereafter, and ended up moving back when we wanted to start a family, my wife Karen and I. So we moved back to Virginia, and I've been in securities litigation or securities regulation law my whole career. And that really has meant representing broker dealers, investment advisors, stock brokers, all the way up to, Wall Street investment banks like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, to actual exchanges like the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. I started my own firm in 2010 after the financial crisis. It was I hate saying this, but it was a golden opportunity for lawyers. It was bad for the world and bad for real estate and a lot of assets in the United States and a lot of people in the United States. But it was an opportunity for lawyers who understood how the securities markets worked, and mortgage-backed securities in particular. And so I started a firm in 2010 with another partner named McGonigal.
Okay.
So the name of our firm was Murphy and McGonigal, and McGonigal had worked at the SEC as an enforcement lawyer. And when we made the announcement that we were starting up this firm, his old boss called over and said, "Murphy and McGonigal, what kind of law firm is that? That sounds like an Irish pub." And so McGonigal and I looked at each other and said, "This is perfect. We've got something to fall back on if this law firm thing does not work out." So 2010, we started the firm, and it was successful. And we opened up offices in New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago, and San Francisco, as well as my home here in Virginia. But I did a lot of commuting to New York to build the firm and to represent clients on Wall Street.
Wow. That's a whole lot, and super impressive, which, is one of the reasons that, I wanted to have you on the show, just to talk about some of the things that you've been doing in the space. So let's go to when were you actually exposed to crypto for the first time? And what was it? Was it Bitcoin, like the shiny object? Was it right into, what was it?
It's funny, whenever you ask, or I ask someone, there's always an answer. No one ever says, "Gee, I can't quite remember."
Right.
Everybody who ended up going down the rabbit hole, as we say, remembers the exact thing that triggered that. And for me, it was Jamie Dimon who got me into crypto. Now, that sounds crazy, right? That is crazy. How could that be? So it was the summer of 2017, and Jamie Dimon was interviewed, and he said, "Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme." And so I was a securities lawyer. I knew a lot about how Ponzi schemes worked. I had handled litigation around some Ponzi schemes in my day. And so I thought, well, this is interesting. Jamie Dimon is a guy I have a tremendous amount of respect for. Has accomplished a lot in his career, really smart guy. He's saying Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme. And it struck me as weird because I didn't know anything about Bitcoin, but I understood it was some kind of token or an asset. So it's really unusual to call a token or an asset a Ponzi scheme. Normally, it's a person who has created this Ponzi scheme and is paying new investors from the money he got from older, or new investor money is going to pay off older investors. Right. And that's a Ponzi scheme, you know, you keep it going as long as you can. And there are plenty of examples you know about.
Yep.
And so I'm like, Bitcoin, wow, that's interesting. I think I'll look into this Ponzi scheme. And so I started off, you know, lawyers like to go to the source document. So I started off with the Satoshi white paper.
Wow.
And I read that thing and I read it again. And I ended up literally reading it 7 times. And
wow.
For anybody who's read it, there is some very high level math in it. And I didn't get the math part. But after reading it 7 times, I felt like I understood about 80% of
wow.
it, which to me was, okay, here's a guy who has solved a problem that people have been working on for a few decades now. And that is, how do you transfer value across the internet like you can send an email?
Right.
You know, it's obvious that's something you would want, but they were unable to crack the code because of this double spend problem. And he solved it through math, hashing, cryptography, the whole thing. And I sort of understood and said, wow, this is quite a breakthrough, you know, scientifically. And the one thing I knew for sure is, well, it's not a Ponzi scheme.
Right.
So then I had to say to myself, okay, what's up here? Jamie Dimon's really, really smart. He says it's a Ponzi scheme. There are only 2 possibilities here. One, he didn't do the work that I had just done to learn what is Bitcoin all about. He just repeated something he heard somewhere that is a Ponzi scheme and didn't really do the work, would be one option. Second option would be he kind of understood Bitcoin and wanted to denigrate it by calling it a Ponzi scheme because he understood very well the threat that technology posed to existing financial structure that he was sitting on top of. So there's one of the 2, and that was 2017. I still to this day don't know what the answer is. You know, He goes to Congress and says, I think Bitcoin ought to be banned. I think now he understands it as a threat to, you know, the state of banking and financial services that he's profited from so well, you know, and so he likes the system as it is and doesn't want it disrupted.
Right.
So that makes sense. But in any event, so when I discovered it isn't a Ponzi scheme, and I don't know what Jamie's talking about, I really went deep. I pivoted my entire law firm from representing Wall Street investment banks, the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, other exchanges like BATS, GetGo, and others that people may not have heard of that were used for high frequency trading venues. We pivoted toward representing crypto exchanges and other entrepreneurs and startups that were looking to build things on blockchains here in the United States. And I went deep. I found out what mining Bitcoin meant. And I told my head of IT, let's go buy some miners. So we started mining Bitcoin in the law firm. And if you've ever been around Bitcoin mining, it's 2 things. It's really hot and it's really loud. It's not really appropriate in a standard office environment. But I had rented out 2 floors of a building in Virginia, and we just started mining. And we would add a machine and wait for the landlord to evict us or complain. And we got up to like 7 or 8 ASIC miners, top of the line. This was in 2017 when, you know, things were going through the roof. In the 4th quarter, it was very hard to find any miners. We ordered ours from Albania and got them delivered. We also bought a bunch of GPUs and started mining Zcash and Monero and Ethereum and all of this. Why? Because I wanted to really learn it. If we were going to represent the industry, I needed to be able to speak the language and really understand mining pools and the SHA-256 cryptography and all of that stuff. So I went deep, pivoted the firm, got involved personally, in investing, not just in Bitcoin, but in some other stuff. And it's been great. It's been fun. It's been a roller coaster.
Wow.
But I retired at the end of 2021. So I've been retired, semi-retired for the last little over 2 years. And it's been great. I spent 3 months a year in Florida, and
Wow.
now I'm back here in Virginia. But in any event, it's a really long answer for Jamie Dimon got me
Wow.
into crypto.
Wow. Now, when you say retired, as far as from your practice, or was it because some of the things that you had done in the crypto space, or a combination of both?
Well, first of all, I always wanted to retire early. I had a
Okay.
number in mind. I
Wow.
worked for a very large law firm for 4 years back here on the East Coast, and I saw the litigators that I was working with who are older, and these guys looked broken to
Right.
me.
Right.
And the older ones were just waiting for their heart attack,
Yeah.
and these people, they all had back problems. They were hunched over. And I said, you know what? I'm not doing that. Not
Yeah.
doing that to myself. Not going to do that to my family.
Yeah.
And so I had a number in mind of when I wanted to retire. That number was 55. I missed by a couple of years because of COVID. I didn't want to take off, on my law firm in the middle of, a difficult period. And so December 31st, 2021, I exited. And now I kind of do a little, it's a cliche. I do a little consulting on the side, sometimes
Right.
with crypto projects. Sometimes some people want some advice about dealing with the SEC and that sort of thing. So I pick and choose stuff, but I'm really just trying to have fun and be
Yeah.
retired.
Yeah, it's a lot different when you're doing what you love and you love what you do. It's a totally different ball game, and
Right.
it's funny that you said that, because when I was in the speaking game, I talked to you a little bit about that backstage. My wife is actually in the chat right now, and so one of the promises, hello beautiful, one of the promises that I I told her, this is about 6 years ago. I was in my about 6 years ago. And after traveling all over the world, being on some of the biggest stages around the world, I thought that's really what I wanted to do. I was in the process of writing a book. I was doing all these things. And I remember traveling with guys who were probably 10, maybe, about somewhere around 10 to 15 years older than me. And I would get up with these guys, and these were really high end speakers, people on the level of like the Tony Robbins and the Eric Worre's and people like that,
Wow.
and on that type of level. And some of these guys are legend in the game. And I remember backstage asking some of these guys, like, how's your family life? And I'm not talking about Tony Robbins and Eric Ward, but I'm just saying on that
Exactly.
level. And
Yeah.
I got to hang out with John Maxwell, who called my wife on a prank call and stuff like that one time. It was pretty cool. But I was asking these guys, like, how's your family life? And come to find out, they didn't have one.
Right.
And they barely saw their spouses. And then it got to the most important, because I have 6 children with my wife. I said, how's your relationship with your children? And they'd be like, I don't have one. And so I had to reevaluate everything. I was like, okay, well, what am I doing? Like this, I'm doing everything wrong here. And so, sometimes we get caught up chasing money that we forget about what the main thing is, right? And so at that point, I realized what my purpose was. And so it just kind of what you were saying, as far as just having a number in mind and saying, okay, no more of this. And that's why crypto to me was such an amazing opportunity, because it gave me the ability to not travel, not to be all over the world. And I probably ran out of pages on my passport. I mean, it was just crazy. And so that's what I think that's what I appreciate about it. And it's one of the reasons that I started this channel, so I could give back, because, we obviously got more questions here, but to me, and I say MetaLawMan, but I don't know if you want me to say it MetaLawMan, but to me, what would you want me to call you? Is it MetaLawMan?
Either way,
Meta,
James is fine.
Okay, well, you got one of the world's greatest names, by the way. I don't know if you know that, but I might be a little biased because mine is James too. But it was one of those things where I realized that this was an opportunity for people to dream again, James. And when I really, I'm 6'8", you see guys that like LeBron could play ball, Joe Montana could throw football, Prince, could sing. But for the average person, they stopped dreaming early in life because of children, circumstance, situation, whatever it was, responsibility. And I saw crypto as an opportunity. I said, oh my God, this has nothing to do with anything other than just being in the right place at the right time and doing your own research. And so that's why I became really passionate about it. So I appreciate your story because it definitely made me think about that.
Hey, listen, Jay, it's so important what you figured out, because so many people don't figure it out. And when they're on their deathbed, what they have is regret that they didn't connect with their wife and their kids, and they lost that. And they only realize at the very end that that's what was important, not the other stuff that they were pursuing. And so it's a real credit to you to figure it out and then do something about it, you know, and be intentional about connecting with the things and the people that are most important.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I wish I could take all the credit. Part of that credit was Steve Jobs' post on Facebook that I actually read and I reposted. It was many years ago. And he was sitting in this room and he said, I'm sitting here, and he talked about all the things he accomplished and all the people that looked up to him. He said it came down to, I'm giving a short version, but it literally probably put me in tears, I think. And I can't remember back, but I know I got really emotional. And it was about all the success and being driven and all this stuff. And he says, I'm sitting here in the hospital room looking at this machine. Red means I'm in trouble. Green means I'm okay. And this is what it's come down to. And he goes, all I can think about is all the things that I miss: family, friends, moments. And I was like, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I think at that moment, I was like, wow, like, what am I doing? You know, yeah.
It's absolutely an epiphany. And I had one, you know, and we remember them. If it's a legit epiphany, you'll never forget it.
No.
I was reading the Rolling Stone magazine, and there was this one column, very, very, very short interview with Dave Grohl, Foo Fighters, of Nirvana. And he had one sentence in there, and this that I remember, and I've remembered my entire life. And he says, I think they asked, like, what advice would you give to people in the industry or whatever? It was, you know, kind of a softball. He said, never be anything less than completely grateful for what you have.
Yeah.
And to me, the verb choice, to be, you know, it's a state of being, gratitude. It's not, hey, I thought, thank you very much, I'm grateful. It is a state of being to live in gratitude. It is stuck with me. I am so grateful for the life I have and for the relationships I have with my family and everything else. And quite frankly, I'm thrilled to meet you. And I don't care if we don't talk about crypto at all. This is the important stuff.
That's right. That's right. No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And this is the stuff that people need to listen to, because a lot of times they get caught up chasing the money or chasing that thing, and they miss the purpose. They miss the main thing. And so I'm so grateful because, like I said, to sit up there and watch guys having strokes and heart attacks and doing this, and I'm just like, what am I doing? So yeah, it was definitely a life-changing moment. I appreciate you sharing that story. If you don't mind, let's talk about the SEC and the case against Ripple. The fact that, it's, in my opinion, misguided, very political. They definitely have some type of agenda. Your thoughts on that, just as a whole?
Yeah, Jay, there's so many thousands of hours going deep on that case. One of the things that I learned coming on to social media, which I was never on social media when I was practicing as a lawyer, because I really couldn't, as the leader of the firm and with a bunch of clients, say anything,
right,
and risk someone being offended or whatever. So I didn't participate at all. And I didn't really understand what had happened until I retired and came onto social media. What I knew was we were all in my business watching what the lawyers for Ripple were doing in terms of getting discovery from the SEC. They really broke new ground in getting internal deliberations from the SEC. Was fantastic. We were all cheering them on. And then when we saw John Deaton enter the fray, we're like, holy cow, because we were so naive. I was in the business a long, long time. This is all I did my entire career, but we were naive enough to believe the SEC is fighting for the investors, particularly the small investors. Here comes a guy saying, oh, let's talk about the investors. Here's 80,000 of them who ask for only one thing, and that's for the SEC to just stop. and leave this project alone and don't attack Ripple and XRP. Find an actual fraudulent, enterprise, of which you and I know there are many, but no, sorry, there's a lot of pollen here in Virginia. I'm going to be choking up here.
Take your time. Take your
anyway,
time.
So I dug in, and the more you unpeel, the more you see. We don't need to go through chapter and verse. Your followers are really, really smart on this stuff. But the thing that really offended me as a securities lawyer, by the way, when I built my firm, we got up to about 60 lawyers. Wow. We had 20 from the SEC, from SEC enforcement and other divisions within the SEC, because they were great lawyers, high integrity people, and all of this. And so that was my, feeling of this institution, a tremendous respect. Then I see that Bill Hinman gives us the free pass to Ethereum in June of 2018. The key fact for me that really turned me on this whole thing was 2 months later. Brad Garlinghouse goes in to meet with Jay Clayton and Bill Hinman and says, I see that you've given the free pass to Ethereum. Like to talk to you about this Ripple project and our token XRP, because we think that it also is sufficiently decentralized. Whatever, I don't know exactly who said what to whom, right? But we do know Brad said, I want to talk about this XRP,
right? Which
is you have to understand the overall picture here. The SEC is telling me, my clients, come on in. Talk to us about your project. We want to have an open two-way dialogue about this really interesting new technology, blockchain, and what your clients are doing. We're going to have a really productive discussion. They were literally saying that. And at the time, I was buying it, Brad goes in there, and the answer is, stop right there. Back up. We will not have any kind of discussion with you about XRP.
Wow.
When 2 months earlier, not only did they have a discussion, they had dozens of calls with the ETH people about their project and about the token and the status of the blockchain and the decentralization of the validators. Great detail. And so Hinman gives a speech saying, you guys are good. It would have been okay with me if Jay Clayton and Hinman said, okay, Brad, thanks for coming in. We don't think your XRP deserves a free pass. Here are 3 reasons why. 1, 2, 3. In which case, Brad could then say, I see what you're saying. Here's my response on the 1, 2, 3. I think you're mistaken. Let me come back with some of my people in a PowerPoint, and we'll show you that we're more decentralized, or whatever it might be, whatever your 3 concerns are. Let's have a back and forth and come to conclusion on this question. Instead of, I refuse to speak to you about this topic, is clearly the wrong answer. Whether people go to it's corrupt or whatever, I don't know. I don't have an opinion on that. I do believe that is inappropriate behavior for a regulator when you've given a free pass 2 months earlier. Right. If you gave no free pass to anybody, then I could understand saying, you know what, we're not going to discuss, what we may or may not do from an enforcement perspective, unless you come in with they have a process where you can ask for a no action letter, which just simply says, if I do these things in these circumstances, and here are all the facts, will you take enforcement action against me? Will you contend that I have violated the securities laws? Yes or no? It's called a no action letter. In any event, that was a long rant. That's my problem with Ripple. Originally, it was wrong to refuse to engage, because that engagement could have led to a resolution and no need for any kind of enforcement action.
Yeah, and even hearing what you just said, the first question that popped in my head is, what was the difference between the two? How did you delineate between Ripple being, not a security? And that's the thing, like that moment. And I always go back to I'm sure you remember the 80s. I think it was in the 80s, Olympics, I always talk about like Nancy Kerrigan, Tanya Harding, when she hired that thug to hit the lady in the ankles. I think she hit Tanya Harding, Nancy Kerrigan in the hand, in the ankle in order to get the starting role. And there was this big old corruption, and I kind of feel like it's the same way, like the SEC hit Rip on the ankle, and it's like, but the question is why, and then we get to a point now, which is into my next question. Gary Gensler gets in front of all these congressional hearings, in front of all these news interviews, and just plays dumb, answers no questions. Every time the question comes up, he can't answer it. But then all of a sudden, here we go. You got Stephen Nereth with all this ETHGate stuff and all the stuff that's coming out. I've never heard of a Stephen Nereth and an XRP gate. I've never heard of anything that like that against, I think they're digging through Brett and Chris Larson's trash looking to see if they tipped well on the last dinner. They got nothing. And so the thing for me, James, is why now? Why come out and call Ethereum a security now? And the only thing, before you answer that, I could think, just my 2 Satoshis or 2 cents, is, are they giving a false sense of justice to the people once they let the monster get so big, just so they can hear up? And because Brad Garlinghouse says, I don't think they're going to prove it. I don't know if it's statute of limitations, whatever. But is this like a false sense of, oh, we're going to do the right thing just so they can get to Ethereum ETF? I don't know. But your thoughts on that?
Well, there's a lot there. Originally, when Gary was appointed, a lot of us thought this was going to be good. And boy, did we get that wrong. I'm glad I wasn't on Twitter at the time. I would have tweeted, hey, this guy knows the in and out of crypto, working at MIT. This is going to be great for innovation in the United States. And boy, did I get that wrong. It's weird. 1 month after he was confirmed in the Senate, he testified, and this was during COVID, so he was testifying by Zoom, and he was prepared in this testimony to work in a proposal. So he was answering a question about something, and then he pivoted to, hey, if you would take a suggestion, and he was kind of timid at the time. He had been in the office only for a month. It wasn't the like guy we see now who just flat out refuses to answer questions and thinks that's fine and doesn't really care. Back then he said, look, I think it'd be extremely helpful if Congress would pass some legislation, because we don't have the authority to regulate these crypto exchanges. And he had one particular exchange in mind, and that was Coinbase, because 22 days earlier, they had approved the IPO of Coinbase. So that Coinbase could IPO, they sell their stock to the public investors. It's the role of the SEC to protect investors. The SEC determined to allow the IPO to go forward. And Gary, I think it was his first appearance, he said, hey, we need legislation to give authority to regulate these crypto exchanges. Implicit in that, of course, was, and we, the SEC, should be the regulator, of course, to have this authority, please. Jay, if he had stuck to that, the natural next move would be, hey, I'd like to propose some legislation, or hey, here's a memo with some bullet points of what we think are important to include in the legislation. And I would like to come up to Congress and talk to the chairman of the relevant committees about how to formulate some policy through legislation that we can enforce, in this crypto world, and have a process like about 100 other countries in the world have gone through. 27 countries in the EU came up with a comprehensive regulatory format for crypto asset, ownership, trading, exchanges, custody, the whole 9 yards. And you know what? Those 27 countries, many of them don't speak the same language.
Right.
We've got Congress, in one language, one country, and he just pivoted and just decided, you know what? I don't need any authority at all. It turns out, upon reflection, that I have all the authority I need to start suing Coinbase, Bittrex, Kraken, Binance US, whatever. And he's just wrong on the law, in my opinion. but it's going to take a while to get there. Your question on Ethereum and the ETF, what is my theory? My theory is the word has gotten out that there is an investigation of the Ethereum Foundation, and the word got out because some other companies received subpoenas. In order for the staff in the enforcement division of the SEC to issue subpoenas, there has to be something called a formal order of investigation, which is approved by a majority of the commissioners, probably 3 out of 5 in this instance. And so there's this pending investigation. What they are investigating, we don't know for sure. But with this deadline coming up on May 23rd to approve or not the Ethereum ETF, I believe that the investigation may be used as a pretext, maybe not to deny, but to delay, and just simply say, surely you can understand that we cannot approve or disapprove an Ethereum ETF while we have this investigation pending. Surely you'll see that we have to wait until we have the conclusion of this investigation and gathered all of the relevant facts in order to make an assessment of whether this ETF will be in the best interest of investors in the United States. That's my guess of the ploy that they're using to just delay and kick the can down the road. I could be wrong, but that's what I think. I would be very surprised if those ETFs are approved in late May.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense to me. Now, I will ask this, Gary Gensler, right now, one of the things that, it seems like there's something there as far as when you see them asking for this ridiculous amount of money from Ripple. And I know this is a little bit off topic, but it kind of goes back into what we're saying. I think it just really shocked a lot of people because we thought, okay, there's $700 something million that was, discussed as far as a secondary sales, whatever. So we thought maybe they'd ask for some type of number between, 0 and that. But this $2 billion asking price, why do you think that number is so high? And what's the reason for that?
So there are 3 buckets. The reason for it is you ask for something high, expecting that the judge is going to, discount from that, take into consideration Ripple's arguments in response, which are coming on April 22nd. But it's not surprising. In every negotiation I've had with the SEC, they start with an astronomical number and come down from that. Now, so there are 3 buckets here. One's called disgorgement, where someone who's issued an unregistered security has to give back the profits from the sale of those unregistered securities. The second bucket is the interest on the disgorgement. In this case, because it goes back years, the interest is $198 million. Wow. The disgorgement, I think, is $876 million. It went up from the $700 million that we heard about earlier in the case because of sales since the complaint was filed, sales of XRP by Ripple since the case was filed. And the third bucket is called a penalty. And what is somewhat typical is for it to be called a one-time penalty. Right. So in an insider trading case, for instance, if somebody made a profit of $100,000, there would be disgorgement of $100,000, some minor interest, and then what they call a one-time penalty, which would be a penalty of also $100,000 for a total of $200,000. Wow. Well, here, Ripple caught a really, really good break in something that happened in the law late last year. So long after the case was filed, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the appellate court over Judge Torres in the Southern District of New York, ruled that in order for the SEC to get disgorgement, there have to be actual victims who lost money. Right. And so the SEC submitted their brief on damages, and their argument, they recognized this Second Circuit case, which was a significant change in the law from what the law had been for my entire career, had been they don't have to do that. But the Second Circuit ruled that they now do have to do that based on a U.S. Supreme Court case from a couple of years earlier, which strongly implied that this was necessary. Okay. So the SEC files their brief, and although caveat here, by the way, this is not legal advice. Caveat is some small portions are redacted. So I don't know what every word, but I read it.
Okay.
And they say the damage here, the victims are some of the institutions. Remember that we're talking only about these institutional trades where there are contracts, face-to-face negotiation of a contract to sell XRP. And then there might be holding periods or other obligations flowing back and forth between the two parties. And so Judge Torres concluded that is an investment contract. So that's what we're talking about, not XRP retail. Gotcha. So anyway, the SEC says the victims here are those who received a lower discount from the current price of XRP than others who received a higher discount. So if XRP was trading at 50 cents and they sold it to somebody for 40, then later they may have sold it to someone, let's just say the price hadn't changed, they sold it to somebody for 45. The SEC says the ones that got it for 45, which remember is less than 50, they were damaged, they were harmed, they suffered something called pecuniary loss because they didn't get as big of a discount as other large institutions who had negotiated with Ripple about buying, XRP, which in my view does not satisfy the Second Circuit case. And so I believe they have a significant problem with that, that first bucket. And of course, if the disgorgement goes away, then the $200 million of interest on the disgorgement also goes away.
Right.
And the court is left to assess a penalty in a pretty weird case, where apparently there are no victims. What is the appropriate penalty to assess there?
Right.
And the judge has wide discretion about how to set that. And in my view, if I were judge, the number would be a lot lower than $876 million. Right. When I find out that I have just presided over a case where, first of all, the XRP retail people did not engage in any securities transactions, and the big part of the case that they won has no losses. Right. And I've presided over this, battle, hammer and tong, for 3 years, and there's no victim. I wouldn't be in a mood to award a huge penalty, but that's just me. What do I know?
Right. Now I have a question, since you said that, a lot of people, especially those who are retail investors, they look back and they go, okay, well, they gave a number. It may not be a realistic number, but they gave a number. So one could think the fact that they gave a number, if Ripple did have the 2 billion, that's almost talk for a settlement because they gave a number. So does that, in your opinion, lead to some type of optimistic feeling that maybe there's some talk maybe going on now because there was a number given, possibly?
Yeah, I need to be real clear. I don't know, and I don't communicate directly with the lawyers. I don't communicate at all, directly or indirectly, with the lawyers running the case. So I don't know. Here's what I think. I think the SEC would have a very difficult time not appealing the parts that they've already lost, and to kind of leave that out there. And then secondly, if there is a ruling on damages that says you didn't prove your disgorgement at all because you got no victims, they're going to appeal that, I think, for sure, because the SEC hates this case. The Second Circuit case is called Goville. It was decided in the fourth quarter of last year, and the case, they lose on this disgorgement thing, and the case was sent back to the district court, and the SEC didn't know what to do. They told the district court judge, hey, we're thinking about taking this appeal to the Supreme Court because we think this disgorgement ruling in Goville is wrong. And then they ultimately didn't do that yet.
Right.
The case is not over. So the court sent it, Second Circuit sent it back to the district court to do an assessment. Are there victims here or aren't there? You know, what is the appropriate penalty, whatever. So the case needs to finish, and then a normal, you know, appeal will go from there, perhaps. So I believe a settlement is unlikely. If I just think it's unlikely, because I think the SEC, if they get a really low penalty, I think they're going to want to appeal, because this case is so high profile. So many people have watched it, that they're going to have trouble leaving that decision sort of undisturbed and not appealed and just sitting out there. So that's my feeling. But you never know. We're not there. We don't know.
Yeah. Do you feel like the longer this plays out, the more damaging it is to the SEC's case, being that you see the decision that happened here recently with Coinbase and secondary sales, or the fact that you found or they've been found by various judges to be unethical, lying in court and things like that? Does it seem like the longer they go out, the more damaging it is to their credibility and the things that they've done with other cases, including Ripple? It just seems to me like, if I was on the SEC, I would think that, asking for money at a time where it was kind of, maybe you could have got more money maybe last year, earlier this year, would have been a better scenario than to play this out, because now it's kind of like everyone's looking at you like, okay, well, you know what? You don't have a chance. And I almost feel like, to some degree, maybe Brad and Chris are saying, look, let's keep fighting. I mean, it's like we're winning, we're victorious. We've got a lot of things in our favor, like Judge Annalisa Torres' decision July 13th, 2023. XRP is not a security, but it's even bigger than that, because now in the space, in the judicial system, they're caught in lies, they're caught in all these different things. Do you feel like the longer it plays out, maybe the more damaging it is to their case?
Well, you said something really interesting about they could have gotten more earlier.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. Because I'm telling you, that Goville case changed everything.
Yeah.
I mean, if their disgorgement goes from 876 million to zero because of a case that was decided in the last quarter of last year, they've really got to be kicking themselves, and they've got to find a way to undo that precedent. And the only way to do that is to go up to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And so this Ripple case, unfortunately, people hate to hear this, could be the vehicle to take it up to the Supreme Court.
Right.
So I think they're going to let it play out. You are right. They have suffered some losses. That debt box case was absolutely devastating, shocking. I've never seen anything like that. In terms of a federal judge chastising not just the lawyers appearing before him, but the entire organization, and describing it as a bad faith organization, sort of through and through, and to make the point that, hey, just so everyone's clear, this is not a couple bad apples here. It is endemic to the institution of the commission. It's just shocking. But at the same time, the SEC is winning cases as well. They just got Do Kwon found liable in the Terraformer Labs case. They love every decision of Judge Rakoff in that case. Judge Fela wrote an opinion that was not helpful on the secondary trading of the assets on Coinbase, and the SEC is using that opinion now in other cases, saying, look, we told you those are investment contracts. So let me just give you a little inside baseball on what happens in a law firm, and I think in the enforcement division as well. If things start going south in a case, what everyone is telling each other is, don't worry, we're going to get this reversed on appeal. This judge is making so many mistakes. This is great for us that there's so many mistakes here going against us, because we're going to get it reversed on appeal. And we all get in a conference room table, and everybody's not, yep, all wrong. This will be reversed for sure. So that's how they're thinking over there. I would predict in enforcement. And, the fact that Judge Fela after Judge Torres had ruled and after Rakoff ruled, Judge Phalo went with Rakoff. They're high-fiving each other, saying, see, told you,
Right.
Judge Torres got it wrong. So I think that they're planning on appealing.
And but for a person who's looking from the outside in, I mean, those are two totally different scenarios. When you look at Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX, Do Kwon and Luna, and you look at Brad Garlinghouse and Ripple, Chris Larson Ripple, or you look at Brian Armstrong and Coinbase. These are people with ethics and first class and doing things the right way versus people who were obviously scamming and doing things the wrong way. And I think one of the things that makes me lose faith in a lot of this, as far as on a legal level, especially when I look at, okay, well, I understand Stephen Nero has all this information, documentation, recordings, and all this different stuff. But the issue that I have, then I go back and I look at Sam Bankman-Fried, who was obviously a bad actor, who was obviously found guilty on many felonies, but for some reason our government, who's supposed to protect the people, who's supposed to be doing things for the betterment of the people, throughout the one thing we all really want to know, who got the money.
Right.
So the one thing, is like, who got, that part, let's throw that part out, who got the money. Wait a minute, we're talking about stolen money. And I remember something that you were talking about. I saw one of your videos when you were talking about people who had been contacting you just in crazy depression. I lost my mom to suicide, so that's a hard topic for me to talk about. But you've mentioned some things about that, and you also mentioned some things about. Sorry, every time I talk about that, I get a little choked up. But you talked about that, and you also talk about people losing everything.
Right.
And I'm thinking that hurts people, us Americans paying our taxes, and that's not relevant to talk. That's something you could just dismiss. So it just makes me lose faith as an American that
Right.
justice is going to prevail. I mean,
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, that was a really, really tough time because I was not prepared for that. When I went on social media, I was not equipped. I started off talking about a lot of weird stuff happened. A lot of fraud happened at FTX, but then a lot of weird stuff happened in their bankruptcy.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point, one of the things that we hear this word narrative a lot. This narrative got out that, hey, what could the SEC do? FTX was an offshore, enterprise not registered with the SEC. Shrug. That's too bad. Wish we could have done something. This is completely wrong as a narrative. FTX US had licenses with the SEC. The process for obtaining those licenses allowed the SEC not only at the beginning, when they were considering granting the broker-dealer license and another license, not only had the right to inspect the entire corporate organization, including parent organizations, they then periodically had the right to inspect the entire organization. It used to be that the SEC only had the right to ask questions of and inspect the registered broker-dealer or entity. That changed as a consequence of the blow-up of a firm called Drexel Burnham Lambert, which at that time, they could only look at the broker-dealer and not at the holding company and the whole structure to see where the money was flowing. Congress saw what happened and said, okay, we're changing that. We're now going to give the authority to the SEC to take a look at the entire structure to see whether this operating entity that we are thinking about licensing is really operating in a safe corporate environment. They had that obligation and they didn't do it. How do we know they didn't do it? Because the guy who walked in there from the street, John J. Ray, said it was obvious from day one that this was a total dumpster fire. It was not one of those things where it was sort of hard to figure out, according to John J. Ray, not me. And he's filed declarations under oath saying they didn't have a list of their employees. They didn't know where the assets were. They didn't know where the keys were to some of these wallets, blah, blah, blah. How in the world could the SEC allow this, to be licensed and do nothing? How? I don't know how, but I do know there were relationships there.
Right.
Gary Gensler's deputy at the CFTC. People forget he was the commissioner he was the chairman of the CFTC before MIT and before going to the SEC.
Right.
And his deputy, his legal counselor, the guy who told him what the law permits and what it does not permit in the context of commodities, was a guy named Ryan Miller, general counsel of FTX US.
Right.
So people wonder, hey, why all the meetings, that he's never talked about, never disclosed? One answer is the money, the campaign funding, to the right people in the right amounts. Another is relationships. And so I don't know what happened. And I think I'm just shocked. There's no investigation of what happened for all of these people to get defrauded. Right. And there's this super quick prosecution where we don't talk about the campaign contributions. We don't talk about the mother and father who were involved, one was an employee, the other apparently the mastermind of the whole campaign finance operation there, or certainly an advisor to it, if not the mastermind. Nothing, absolutely nothing happened to them.
James, what happened? What changed from the MIT Gary that was giving quotes about Algorand and talking about fast payments cross-border by this company called Ripple? I mean, everything was just so positive. What changed when he got to the SEC? Like, what's wrong with that leadership there? What in your opinion, how did we get here?
Well, it's speculation. And I think the speculation that I have, I'm not going to pass it off on somebody else. It's not like I read it somewhere. It's politics, and the powers that be in our government, both in the legislature and in the White House, want to crush crypto. And what surprised me is somehow many in this crypto community believe that once BlackRock got behind Bitcoin and a Bitcoin ETF, that somehow the war was over and we had won. And boy, was that ever a mistake. They're coming after Uniswap. They're coming after everybody. And I think that this message was communicated to Gary. Hey, you need to get on board. We need to crush this industry. We know Senator Warren wants to crush the industry. We know many in big banking want to crush the industry because they don't want their deal disrupted. They make a lot of fees on banking and transactions and securities and all of these things that, smart contracts, DeFi totally disrupt the model of how they're making money. And so they don't want that. And so we're seeing it play out in the refusal to allow Custodia Bank to exist. You've got to have a master account to exist. The Fed denies a master account to Custodia Bank, which has the safest banking model I have ever seen ever in the history of mankind, since banking started thousands of years ago, which is over 100% liquid reserves for deposits. They're not going to lend out the deposits to anyone, which is completely different from the rest of banking in the United States, which is called fractional reserve banking. If you deposit $100 in my bank, I'm going to lend out 92 of those bucks. Hope I do a good job underwriting. Hope they pay me back. But if not, things go south. Well, then the FDIC and the Fed will step in and take care of the problem and solve it. And it happens all the time. We have more bank failures here in the United States than most other countries in the world. People don't realize it. They think we've got this fantastic banking system. We have bank failures like crazy here. Caitlin Long, Harvard Law grad, 20 years at Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, as one of the smartest people I've ever been in the same room with, says, I want to start this bank that is going to be the safest and soundest bank in this country, 100% reserved, and they refuse because she was willing to service the crypto industry, and they just can't have that. They
Wow.
want the banks to debank people who deal with crypto. And so it's all of a piece with the SEC's piece, the banking piece, the whole thing, the FBI piece, if you want to throw in Stephen Narayoff into that, category as well of this choke point 2.0. It is a whole of government approach because they view it as a threat to government control and a threat to the business model of big banking.
Yeah, the crazy thing when you start talking about, coming from a political perspective of, corruption and the things they've done, it kind of sounds like a 2024 movie that should come out called Pinocchio. Because that's literally what it is. It's like a puppet master. You got Gary Gensler with all the lies. Yeah, I think it would sell out. I would definitely go watch it. Let's talk about XRP Las Vegas. I was there last year. It was absolutely phenomenal for so many reasons. And again, I don't get caught up, when you come from my background, from my basketball days to being around celebrities, to playing in celebrity games, to being on some of the biggest stages around the world. I don't get starstruck, but I felt special, James, last year. I'm just telling you, I felt special. I looked up and I saw people, on your level. I saw people, just really high end people. And to me, a lot of people maybe don't understand what I'm saying, but I think it's a different environment than if I was going to a convention that was based off of Chicago coin, and that doesn't exist. I'm being facetious, but yeah, I don't want to say any coin that's going to piss somebody off. But and in Chicago coin, I might find a bunch of 20-something-year-old guys shilling this coin because it's 15 zeros, and and I think part of the thing that excites me about Ripple and XRP, knowing what I hold, is that, we're not seeing the price move and the shiny thing, and it's not sexy and all those things, but I understand what it was created for. Right. And the thing that for so long used to, and before even we talk about Las Vegas, I want to ask this question, because the thing that used to confuse me for so long, James, is all these maxis, and you got some big ones out there. I mean, you got some big time people that are, all about Bitcoin and other Solana. I mean, you even hear like Raw Powell and all these guys, all these different projects. Why don't these people see the value in XRP? And I just couldn't get it for a long time. I was like, why don't they see it? That's my question to you. Why don't other people see what you see or I see? And I'm not saying you're, XRP. It's not that. It's just that from a business standpoint and from a legal standpoint, we obviously see that this is a legit company. It's not right. Chicago coin. It's not, when Bitcoin tanked from 68,000 to 15, they didn't run like a lot of companies run out of the country. They didn't lay off all the CEOs. They didn't fire, but instead they grew. They hired, they acquired, they brought in some of the most brilliant people around the world, and they're represented by CEOs, not going around talking about Lamborghinis and watches and bags. And I'm not going to say who that is. Most people know, but they got integrity. Why don't more people see the value in that? That company and the asset XRP. I'm just baffled.
Listen, when Brad Kimes reached out to me and invited me to come on his show.
Love Brad indeed.
I did too. What a guy. I have not met him in person. One of the things I'm really looking forward to in Vegas. But what happened was Mark Moss reached out to me and asked me to come on his show. I was a complete neophyte. I wasn't on social media at all. I did not know that there was a thing called a Bitcoin maximalist, literally. So he calls me, he says, "Hey, can you come on?" I said something probably about Sam Bankman-Fried because I was following that very closely. "Hey, can you come on and talk about that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Happy to do it." Had no idea who that guy was. I go on and we start talking, and then I start mentioning the existence of other tokens. And he's like, "Yeah, but none of those do anything." And I said, "Look, I don't know. I'm definitely not an expert in any of this, but seems like a small number of the maybe 10,000 at that time, 12,000 tokens are working on projects that have some promise. And we'll just see, kind of like in the 1990s, all of these .coms. So there were a few that didn't succeed just a little bit, were wildly successful." And I said, "Sounds like there's some." He's like, "I don't know of any like that." And I said, "Well, I've heard of this Ripple XRP and this acting as a bridge currency for cross-border transactions. I don't really know much about it. But, and so I just sort of repeated some of the headlines that I had read. He's like, yeah, I don't think so. And so then Brad reaches out to me and says, hey, come on my show. And between then and being on with Brad, I really studied up. And what I learned was the XRP community is different. The XRP community talks about stuff like FSOC, the Financial Action Task Force, the Bank of International Settlements,
Right.
and really sophisticated stuff. And
Yeah.
I was stunned because what I wasn't seeing, although you do see a little bit of, hey, this token's going to go up 100x, 1,000x, blah, blah, blah. That's part of, why crypto Twitter exists, I guess. But kind of really going deep on the topics of this whole environment that Ripple was playing in and all of the things that were being announced internationally, you have to kind of say, well, wow, that's pretty impressive.
Right.
Particularly given this dark cloud that the SEC decided to put over the head of Ripple and Brad Garlinghouse and the rest of the crew there. It's amazing that what they've done to overcome that, in my opinion. I'm not an expert in it. So I've learned a lot, from Brad and from others, digital asset investor. Love listening to his stuff. And the thing is, as a lawyer, what you need to understand about lawyers is, while we really appreciate well-crafted legal arguments and great turn of phrase, the thing we really, really love is evidence. And so when you go and look at these shows of, Brad or DAI or whoever it might be, they're just putting up documents.
Yeah.
They're putting up recordings from years ago. I have no idea where they're finding this stuff.
Right.
And it says what it says. They don't tell you what to think about this. Right. They just say, here it is. Read for yourself, listen to this, see this person on camera saying this, and draw your own conclusions. So as a lawyer, I've really been amazed by kind of this crowdsourcing of evidence is amazing.
Yeah.
And so in any event, it's really been terrific to see what this community does. And the reason I'm going to Vegas, if I can just translate that, transition to that, Brad called me and said, hey, really encourage you to come. I said, love to do it. And the reason is, there are two reasons. First reason is I got banned from Twitter last summer.
Yeah, I remember that.
So my account was taken over by a hacker who had SIM swapped my phone. And so it was taken over for a couple of days and they posted some bad stuff. I regained my phone, regained my account, and then Twitter refused to reactivate the account.
Wow.
And so I'm like, what the heck's going on? And so I do these appeals, and get nowhere. My appeal is, hey, could you tell me what rule, because you've seen my comment, it's not incendiary at all. I try to give objective takes on legal cases. There's a lot more incendiary stuff out there. And I couldn't get anywhere. And so finally, I'm like, I got to take this to a different level. Somehow I got to reach out to Elon because, it's been 3 months.
Wow.
Well, fortunately, I'm not, selling anything. I'm not monetizing. It didn't really bother me. I got to read books. I went on vacation with my kid, had fun. So then I saw that DAI was also suspended at the same time. So I reached out to him, never spoken to him, never interacted with him. And we got along great. I said, hey, DAI, you want to come on board my effort to kind of raise the visibility of this thing? So long story short, I write this 5-page letter, which is kind of funny, about our experiences dealing with X. DAI was told why he was suspended. And the reason was, DAI is a popular account. He's got 400,000 followers, got 80 million views on YouTube.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of impersonators on X. He got a reason. I never got a reason why I was banned. He got a reason, and that was, you are an impersonator. And so they were
Really?
saying to the original guy, "You're an impersonator," instead of going after the actual impersonators
Right.
of DAI, which is kind of funny. So anyway, I write this long letter, and I reach out to Brad. And I say, Brad, the only way this is going to get, I addressed it to Elon Musk, Linda Yaccarino, and a lawyer in the legal department at Twitter. And Brad Kimes took it and ran with it. And
Wow.
that letter went everywhere.
Yeah.
And it was read like, or at least looked at over 5 million times.
Wow.
And within, I think, 24 hours, DAI was back online and I was back online in 48 hours with all of our followers restored. And what I really cared about was DAI, who is kind of, doing this for a living kind of thing. And it's like shocking what had happened to him. And so I was really happy that he was reinstated. And the reason was this XRP community, who did not know me from Adam, just was sending all of these messages saying, "Hey, we've got to get behind this effort. This is important. Retweet, retweet." And I just want to go and meet these people and thank them.
Yeah. I was one of them. And because DAI is a good friend of mine, he's helped me out in a major way. Him and Brad almost like adopted me. It's amazing. And I just love those guys. And then I obviously saw what was going on with you as well, but he gives you a lot of credit. DAI gives you a lot of credit for helping him get his channel back. It was a little scary for a minute because it was longer than most. And I think they've done some things now, because I've had to report at least 6 or 7 impersonators over the last 90 days. And it's just crazy how quick these guys can, as soon as you get one off, they're back. But now they do the ID and the facial recognition deal. So I think maybe they've implemented that maybe since you guys have gotten off, because that's what allowed me to get those other guys off the platform. So what do you expect as you're going to, I guess this is going to be your first XRP Las Vegas. What are you going on stage? What are you going to be talking about? Do you know any of those things?
Yeah. So Brad asked me to participate in some panel that'll talk about the current state of crypto regulation and the cases, some of what you and I have talked about. But the thing I'm really looking forward to is I'm going to be doing a fireside chat kind of thing with John Deaton to kind of, ask questions to John so we can talk about what his experience has been in this, quest to unseat Elizabeth Warren and what the important issues are to the people of Massachusetts and to the people of the United States, and just, really interact with John. I love John. I love what he's doing. I love what he did for the XRP community. The guy is a fighter. And if every person in Massachusetts could read the book Food Stamp Warrior, he would get 100% of the vote.
Big time.
What this guy has overcome is incredible. And the lessons that he's taken away from the difficulties, the incredible difficulties and hurdles and impediments that he's overcome, says everything about him. And he just wants to help people who find themselves in similar circumstances to what he and his brothers and sisters had to deal with, and his mother, in terms of addiction and poverty and all of these and violence, all of these things. And the guy is such a uniter. When you see him in a crowd, people hug him. Every man is his brother.
That's right.
Every woman is his sister.
That's right.
And that's how he feels. He wants to unite people. And you know what? We really, really, really need that in our country right now, because I've never seen it so divided, where people hate each other because of their differing political views, and just forget, well, we are all Americans here, right? I mean, there are bonds here, right? It's scary, the degree of division that exists, and the fact that his opponent decided that the most important thing to do when she announced a re-election bid was to declare that she was going to form an anti-crypto army to go after the 50 million Americans who own crypto and people who engage in crypto businesses and provide services to crypto businesses. She wants to destroy them. The purpose of an army is violence. This is what she wants to do, is destroy 50 million Americans.
That's right.
John wants to unite everybody and find common ground. That's what we need.
Yeah.
We need to reject this kind of division, because it gets pretty scary as it picks up momentum and you start gaining votes and putting people in these buckets where if you're in this bucket, you're going to hate all the other buckets. It's dangerous, really.
Yeah.
And I just hope and pray that John gets his message out, because if he does get his message out successfully, he's going to win.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I was asking someone this question a while back, and they were, well, what is one guy going to do? And I said, but you got to understand, if he gets in, that voice, just a voice, just to have a voice there, means everything in the world to this space and to everything that we're fighting for. One of the things I also like about John too is, I felt like it's meant to be, James, because if you think about it, most people would have attacked him on all the things that he mentioned in that book, but he put the book out. So it's kind of like, what can you say? I already put it out there. And I think that's what makes him so phenomenal. One of the things you were talking about here, or one of the questions I had, was your gratitude towards the XRP community, which I think you shared that. How about your assessment of the Ripple case? And now we hear about this crazy Wells notice with Uniswap. Your take on that?
Yeah, I've talked about Ripple. My guess is it's not going to settle. It's going to go through this damages phase, and I think Ripple's going to do well, and I think the SEC is going to get stuck with the Second Circuit decision and have to eat it, and so they're going to want to appeal. Right. I think for sure. Now, in the event that, I don't expect this to happen, but in the event the judge issues a penalty, remember there's the 3 buckets: disgorgement, interest, penalty.
Right.
In the event that she issues a penalty for 876 million or whatever, anything in that area, remember, then Ripple is in the Donald Trump position. They're going to have to get an appeal bond. If they want to appeal that instead of pay it, which I think they would. So that's tricky to get somebody to step up and write an $876 million appeal bond. But in any event, I expect appeals. So I don't expect a settlement, resolution after this phase. I could be wrong, but I think there's too much stuff that is harmful to the SEC's overall enforcement effort in Judge Torres's original summary judgment opinion, that they want to have a crack at trying to get that undone. With respect to Uniswap, we don't know much. All we know is they announced they have a Wells notice, which means the staff of the SEC is said to them, we're going to recommend to the commissioners that they authorize an action against you. So Uniswap gets to respond, generally 30 days to submit a response to that, saying, you're wrong, staff. Send this to the commissioners with your recommendation. We hope they will not, but I think they will rubber stamp the recommendation of the staff. And next thing you know, there's going to be an enforcement case, in which case you will have litigation by the SEC against the undisputed number 1 centralized exchange in the United States, and the undisputed number 1 decentralized. Well, look, I don't want to pretend like I know one of the largest decentralized exchanges in the world. That was created by Uniswap Labs in Brooklyn, and so now they're subject to SEC jurisdiction, and they're probably regretting that decision to build and innovate in the United States. And it's just really, really sad that is the state of affairs, that it is dangerous in the USA to do any innovation in the financial services space, because it is impossible to predict the actions not only of the SEC, but of the Fed and every other agency of the United States government, which is on this anti-crypto choke point 2.0. I mean, even if you're not doing anything that they can come up with a theory of it's wrong, well, if you're interacting with crypto players, you can just have all your bank accounts closed one day, no explanation. How about that?
So
it's dangerous here, and it's just upping the ante. Congress has got to do something. If they're not going to pass legislation, Congress has got to get involved in these cases and file amicus briefs, not with one senator like Senator Lummis and Coinbase, but with dozens of senators and dozens of House members saying this has got to stop. The SEC does not have this authority. We haven't given the authority to the SEC to regulate digital assets. We're considering bills now, but in the meantime, this has to stop because they're asserting authority that they do not have, just like Gary Gensler admitted on May 6, 2021, he didn't have the authority. He was right then. He's wrong now.
Right. Do you see, and I love that explanation, where do you see this fight going? You say Operation Choke Point 2.0. Some people call it a corrupted game of chess for control. Where do you see this going? How does this play out? Where is this headed?
I think the only way to stop the whole thing is a significant change in government with this election cycle. And I don't like to get political. I do talk about issues, and so Robert F. Kennedy has declared himself the only pro crypto candidate. I think that Vivek, who is pro crypto for sure, has to an extent Donald Trump's ear, because when Vivek dropped out and then he appeared with Donald Trump maybe the same day or the next day at Mar-a-Lago, Trump's standard speech changed.
Yeah.
Out of the blue, he mentions debanking and CBDCs that he's opposed to. He had never talked about that stuff. I think it was on a Friday or something. Saturday Night Live then did a skit making fun of Trump for saying debanking, because debanking's not a thing, according to Saturday Night Live, when we all know, unfortunately, that it really is a powerful thing. And so, if Vivek has an influence, perhaps he would have an influence on personnel. If there's a change in government, there's a really great candidate to be the next chairman of the SEC on day one after the inauguration in January, and that would be Hester Peirce. That can be done in one day. Remove Gensler as the chairman, replace him with Hester Peirce, and then get rid of Gary entirely, and that would break new ground. So normally, this is important. Normally, when a government changes party, the chairman of the SEC not only steps down as chairman, he resigns so that the new president can get in his person and get the 3-person majority. Because the way it works is the president gets 3 and the minority gets 2 of the 5. So if it changes, then this is what Jay Clayton did. So Trump was in, Trump lost before, I think in November, Clayton says, I'm out, I'm resigning as chairman and stepping down from the commission so that Biden could put in a new guy, Gary Gensler, and he's also the chairman, and then he's got his 3. So that's what, if there's a change, that's what Gensler should do. That is what the tradition is, not only in this commission, but in a lot of commissions, for the person to step down so that the new administration can get their person in and get their majority on that commission.
Now you're using the word tradition, but you're not using the word mandatory.
Right.
So it's not, he doesn't have to step down.
It's not mandatory. He has a term that goes into, I don't know, maybe 2026.
Wow.
So he has a term. And so because this tradition has been upheld for so many cycles, it's never been tested. Can the president fire an SEC commissioner? And if so, does the president need good cause? And so there have been some law review articles written, one by Yale Law School, saying that it's not in the Constitution. It's not addressed by the Constitution, but the better argument is that the president has the authority to fire a commissioner of the SEC without a showing of good cause. So you could imagine Gensler refusing to do what all of his predecessors have done and say, go ahead, try it, try to fire me. This, of course, is all premised on somebody replaces the current administration.
Yeah. And I guess that would also, you kind of wonder who's, as far as Senate, and that's why we need these changes, because there could be some people higher up, like the puppet masters, that may play a part in him refusing that.
Right.
To keep the pet bull at bay, if you will.
Yep.
Yeah. So these elections are very important, and change is definitely needed.
Yep.
Yeah, I see that. It's you talked about Trump and the gentleman having his ear as far as CBDCs. Trump had EFT, was ETS, and no, I'm sorry, what is not
NFTs?
NFTs, and he had all these other things that he was involved in, which just made me feel like he was pro, crypto. But we'll see how that plays out. Any final words as we're at almost 1,300 people live between X and YouTube. We appreciate each and every one of you guys that are here. Any final words for everybody? And I'm definitely, being that I'm here in Vegas, and even if I wasn't, I would be going to the event. Looking forward to meeting you here in Las Vegas and seeing that debate or that talk with you and John Dean. That's going to be amazing.
I had this thought. I was really looking forward to meeting you. I knew we were going to have fun. This has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
But one of the things that occurred to me, Jay, is how Elizabeth Warren and the anti-crypto army uses this crypto bro stereotype, it's a very negative stereotype. I think we need to fight back. And I think we need to find ways to come together and raise money for for charities like orphanages in war-torn regions or whatever, whatever that might be, like a charity basketball tournament,
awesome.
Where the XRP team plays the Bitcoin maxis and live stream it, and people contribute, and the loser commits to, contributing Bitcoin to the charity or whatever. I think that we don't need to just sit here and take it. And say what these guys really care about is buying their next Lambo. That's not you and me. That's a very, very tiny percentage of people who think that way and do that. And they're entitled to do that, but we need to push back. Not only do we need to elect John Deaton, but we need to show people that this crypto industry actually is very civic minded and a bunch of good people. And, I think a basketball tournament thing could be so much fun. Who knows? Maybe Wendy O is a great, point guard or whatever, and I could coach the team. I'm getting a little old to battle for the rebounds, but I just want to throw that out there, and to all of your listeners, we need to organize ourselves to have our voice heard in November, but we also need to do good things collectively for our society. To show really what's in our hearts and who we are.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I've been a part of a lot of celebrity basketball games. I know what it takes to get them going. I think Brad Kimes and DAI would be great to that, maybe at the next XRP event, because you're thinking about, you got people going there, they're paying a certain dollar amount. You can have people come to this crypto celebrity game, if you will, like you said, XRP versus Bitcoin. It's a certain dollar amount to get in. I think that could raise a lot of money because you got so many people that are here for the event anyway. So you could do it like the day prior or the day that morning of or afternoon of. The only thing I would say in that scenario, I think you would be a great coach, probably on Phil Jackson's level, where you're doing, hey, Scotty, that kind of thing. But I would definitely have to have the referees be maybe Stuart Alderete and maybe John Deaton, because the Bitcoin maxis would figure out a way to try to pay the rest off, and I couldn't have that.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, Deaton is an athlete, so you're going to need Deaton, I think, at the 4, probably power forward.
Right.
But we could get Paul Grual. To put on the stripe, because the general counsel of Coinbase, he was a judge. He was a federal judge.
I didn't know that.
This guy's resume is mind-blowing.
Wow.
He's got an engineering degree from MIT. He went to law school at one of the top law schools in the country, the University of Chicago, and then he was a federal magistrate judge you know. And so when he says something about what's going on with the
Oh
SEC
yeah.
and what's going on in federal court, he speaks with a lot of authority. Anyway, great guy. I'm glad he's involved, you know,
Right.
and an important player in this whole industry. But I like the way you're thinking.
Yeah.
Last plug, my son raised a ton of money for wounded veterans by breaking the world record for pull-ups in a 24-hour period.
Wow.
So David Goggins, former Navy SEAL, had set the record at like 4,000 pull-ups, which is a lot of pull-ups to do. And
Wow.
so anyway, my son broke Goggins' record in like 12 hours or something.
Are you
And it was
serious?
live streamed on Instagram, and there was just money constantly coming in, you know, from people just watching on Instagram. So in any event, I wanted to throw that out because I knew you would be the right guy
Wow.
to talk about, and we can talk about it offline and make something happen where
Yeah.
we can make a difference for people.
Man, I'm all in. I appreciate you. This has been one of my favorite interviews. Guys, if you guys do me a huge favor, go over to, let's see if I can bring it up here. Let's see, it's MetaLawMan. Let's see, his X account is at MetaLawMan. You can also go over to what I found here when I went to his site. Let's see if I can find it here. It is, what is this? MetaLawMan.io. What do people learn about you here? What can they do here as far as information?
This is it's kind of a library of things that I have published or interviews that I have done. There is some information if you're interested in metaverse. I did a report on the law of the metaverse, believe it or not. Right after I retired, I wanted to take on a project. So did a kind of interesting project on what is the law of these in these metaverses. So there are other resources there, but mainly you can see, you know, topics that I've talked about relating to crypto principles.
Okay. Love it, guys. Do me a favor, go over here and follow my friend James, MetaLawMan. Appreciate you, my friend. Look forward to having you on again, and look forward to seeing you in XRP Las Vegas 2024. Thank you so much for being on.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. Guys, I appreciate you guys. Over 1,300 people live. Thank you guys so much. Make sure you guys check us out tomorrow. Until then, it's your boy James, aka 68J. Until next time. Bye-bye.